Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Inshallah, we're going to start in a minute.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum everyone. Akiba, I think we can start then, or do you want to wait for a few people?
Nee, let's start. Let's start.
All right, awesome. I'll just share my screen. Second. Second. All right, could you let me know if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Thank you so much.
I think you should be able to see my screen now.
Yep.
All right. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum everyone. We hope you're well. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Before we start on the session about leading with principles, I'll just give you a brief intro of who we are and what we're doing. So I'm Mohammed Simrez. I'm part of the team that manages Ihsan Connect. And Ihsan Connect is essentially a community that we're trying to build of ambitious Muslim professionals, where when you're pursuing ambitious careers, it feels like you're alone in navigating that difficult path of balancing deen and the dunya and actually excelling in both. And we believe that there's no conflict in these things, but they can actually join hands together and actually empower one and the other amongst themselves if it's taken in the right way and if you have the right guidance for that. So that's the thesis behind this community, and we're hoping to grow it session by session. We just ended our cohort 3, and this is the last session for that. We'll be launching our cohort 4 and other future ones, inshallah, and we'll share the social links that you can follow if you want to be part of them, should you choose to do so, inshallah. All right, so we'll start. And before we get into the topic itself, I'll just give you a brief intro of what the purpose of this is. It's fourfold essentially. And how we go about this is firstly, we do discussions which are interactive on helping us further our professional and Islamic ambitions based on the topics that we do. Second, which is our second main goal, is spiritual rejuvenation, where we gain and provide motivation to the network and learn to develop a closer relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because that is the end goal. The third is to provide you with a network to share professional and religious ideas. And the way we have this model is you'll have extremely young people joining, could be startup founders or fresh graduates, and you have senior people like partners in firms and CXOs. And we have people across this continuum that just share their insights together. And we're really grateful for everyone because no matter the field of work you're in, you're always able to provide value with your perspectives. And the last part, which is one of my favorites, is problem solving, where you share ideas and solve problems related to, again, professional and religious ambitions and problems that you might face on a personal level, along with problems you might face in your workspace while trying to be a practicing Muslim. So there's really no limit in terms of what you discuss and the things you want to solve. And the way we do this is actually four tiered. First, the most common method is online meetups, which has been a dominant method, where we'll meet once a week or once a month and discuss a topic relevant to our ambitions. One of our favorite ones has been about how you reconcile being ambitious people and still exceeding or striving for excellence in the deen. And Asad Husain has done a lot to give us insights on that we're quite grateful for. The second thing, which is something we're trying to do, is in-person retreats. Inshallah, duas requested that we'll be able to pull it off maybe this year. But yeah, so that's always something we're trying to do to just hopefully the goal is to provide annual 3-day retreats that allow you to focus on spiritual upliftment and visual alignment. The third thing is peer support, which is you have one-to-one sessions with group members. And the idea is that, again, you don't have to have everything figured out. And unfortunately, once you enter the professional world and start climbing that ladder, the assumption is that the people you see around yourself, all of them seem to have that network or idea in mind. And the hope is that we provide that for people in the same way that has a more religious angle to it as well. And the last, which will be launching soon, inshallah, is publications, where anyone who can't be part of the network, because for context, we only want to have 15 to 20 people at a time, so we can give as much value to people as possible. So for anyone else who's still interested in the learnings, we provide session summaries and academic papers to help you along your thinking and along your journey until we can have you in the next cohort with us, inshallah. Moving on, some of our past sessions, we've had 15 total for now. And the topics, like I mentioned earlier, include like the concept of wealth, how you balance your life on the religious and spiritual level, spiritual and work level. Second is just the mentorship model in Islam, Islamic finances, and more. So that's just a wide range of topics that we do every time. Our participants include people from Pakistan, US, Canada, UAE, and other countries. And again, the goal has always been to have a model where networking and mentorship are developed. That leads us to today, where we'll be talking about session is going to be about leading with principles. And we have two guests with us and our active members, Mr. Asad Husain and Ahmed Maki. I'll give you a brief intro of each. So Asad Husain is a partner at McKinsey and Company in Canada, and he advises the automotive sector and their industrial mobility clients on large-scale strategy, operations, and performance transformations. He's also a core member of the McKinsey Center for Future Mobility. He managed the Education Roadmap project in Pakistan and holds an MBA from Harvard Business School and a bachelor's in mechanical engineering from the University of Waterloo. So thank you, Asad, for your time. Always appreciate it. Second is Ahmed Maki. He's an experienced management consultant with expertise in leading large-scale reform projects and health and education sectors. He was previously associate partner at Impetus, and he mentors and trains consultants across various sectors, across policy, strategy, and the public sector. He's undergraduate from the University of Management Sciences, also known as LUMS, and holds a master's master's degree from the University of Notre Dame. Again, Maki bhai, thank you so much for your time. And now, last thing is just if you can all follow our LinkedIn page to stay connected. We will be posting session summaries in the future and any pages or reports that we publish as well. So if in case you can't join the cohort for every week, we'd really encourage you guys to join this, inshallah, and gain as much benefit as possible. With that, I think we're done with the promotion and we can actually get to the session which everyone came for. All right. So I think, Asad bhai, over to you. I'll be sharing the screen.
Thank you, Sumrez. I'll start by saying Sumrez highlighted the cohort is comprised of young people and people with experience. I think, unfortunately, I'm now in the stage where I fall into the latter. I was talking to someone who was wanting to apply to McKinsey, and he called me Asad uncle, and I was like, oh my God, like I've achieved that level of. Oh well, but inshallah, I'll try to speak for about 10-15 minutes and share a few thoughts on leadership. And I'll try to keep this mostly in English so we make it accessible to the entire group. But occasionally, when I see Maki Bhai on screen, I just can't help but speak in Urdu because we spent time working together 10 years ago, and 90% of our conversations were in Urdu in those days. So we will try. But inshallah, if we go forward, Sumrez. The idea here is what I wanted to start with was thinking about what is the foundational premise of what does it mean to lead with principles, and how do we link it to Islam, right? And so let's land on common definition, right? So first of all, what is leadership? As the bullet on the page articulates, it is the ability of an individual to influence, inspire, and guide others towards a shared goal, right? And then the second sentence I find equally important because it is a social process. Leadership is not necessarily one, often is, but not necessarily one that requires formal authority over the people that you are leading. And it is about aligning people, empowering them to maximize something, and then driving the collective result. And so just look at the words that are used here. It's influencing, inspiring, guiding, aligning, empowering, driving. Largely about soft power than direct managerial authority. And so this is why I say often, like when I speak about leadership within McKinsey, a global consulting firm, or with my clients, or in other sectors, leadership is not the same as management or supervision. Management and supervision implies a strong degree of formal authority. And what I want to talk about today is how do you do that when you also don't necessarily have the formal authority? And often, how do you do it outside of the context of work? So let's talk about why leadership matters, right? For me personally, the way I think about leadership is It is how we can have impact beyond ourselves, how we can do things beyond what we know we can do with our two hands or with the donations that we make personally, etc. It's about how can we move the needle in a much bigger way by helping and inspiring others. Yeah. And when you think about leadership, ideally it helps us both in this world and the hereafter. And so it's funny, I was talking to Maki Bhai over WhatsApp when we were preparing for this. I couldn't help but link it to the concept of al-Mohsinin, or the people who do good deeds or the best deeds or who achieve excellence, right? And so in the Quran, this phrase al-Mohsinin, or this word I should say, appears more than 40 times. Its root word, or I'll say the singular version, appears I think another 30 or 40 times as well. It's quoted often in Surah Al-Baqarah. It's quoted often in Surah Al-Imran and like other surahs in the Quran. And what is it? It is the person who practices excellence in faith, actions, and treatment of others. And again, those three I would describe as like the core of ethics and spiritual behavior in Islam. And so if you think about like how are we supposed to act as leaders, for me, this concept of being part of al-Mohsinin is the way I try to think of it for myself and for my family, and how I encourage others to think about it. And perhaps not coincidentally, as Sumrez mentioned, this group, the purpose we come together, it's called Ihsan Connect, which is the same, if it is effectively the same word, and Mohsinin is just those who do good, and Ihsan is the good that you do. Maybe if I share just one anecdote, there have been two moments in my career in particular that I remember, and I'll share just from one of them, which is linked to this phrase, and I share why it means so much to me. There was a moment in my career about 2.5 years ago. Those of you who are living here in the West know what happened about roughly 2.5 years ago in the world and what that meant. And there was a moment where I had a choice to either, not do something or do something that I felt was right, the right thing to do. And but it was, I'll say, professionally, could have some implications, consequences, and so on. And I was really wrestling with it. And I did dua istikhara at night, like multiple nights, and I was like talking to my family, and I was just thinking about like what is the right thing for me to do as a leader here, and how do I live my true authentic self. But Alhamdulillah, it's just a funny, coincidence, or I don't know what to call it. My daughter is in an Islamic school, and they had like, a little event for parents. And this verse in the Quran, which talks about Al-Muhsinin, was part of the passage that they chose to talk about the children, presented and recited that phrase from the Quran, or that verse, that chapter, the portion extract from the Quran. It's just one of those things where you have this moment of clarity. And so that's why I keep coming back to this concept of al-Mohsinin. And I encourage each of you, Maki Bhai might talk about it a little bit as well. I encourage each of you to look it up and think about what does it mean for yourself and how you lead in the moments when you have an opportunity to lead. But again, just trying to share a little bit from there. If we go ahead, maybe I wanted to share, I'll say 5 bits of advice. Just try to be very, very practical and thinking. And this will come from a place of, I grew up in Pakistan, but I've lived now in Canada for the last 20 plus years. And so my advice is a little bit sort of more anchored towards Muslims living in, let's say, the West, I would call it. But inshallah, it will be also helpful for people living everywhere, whether it is in the Gulf, in Pakistan, in other parts of the world as well. So maybe 5 bits of advice. Number one would be building self-belief. I share openly in this group. The number one thing I hear from people who come, who ask for advice, or what do they say? They say, Asad bhai, I'm sorry, I don't have the experience, I don't have the position, I can't speak as eloquently as you, I don't know this, like all the reasons why they can't be leaders. And my advice to them always is, hey, start small. Start small, learn by doing, try to apprentice from someone. You don't necessarily have to go out and try to be the next Khalifa in Islam. Like just start do a small thing that you can lead with your community, lead in your mosque, lead in the workplace, demonstrate and build your own self-belief that you can play a leadership role, and of course get advice and help along the way. But I think it is incumbent upon all of us as Muslims to lead in some way, even if it's small, right? So that may be the first thing. I think on the second thing, on authenticity, again, this is where maybe living in the West comes in my 20-ish years that I've been in the workplace, one of my biggest regrets is for the first, call it 12 years of my professional career, I I was not explicit about the fact that I was a Muslim, and how I practiced Islam. So it's like in hindsight, it is so funny now. I would sneak out from work on Fridays to go pray in the mosque, etc. People would only like really figure out that I was Muslim during Ramzan because they'd be like, "Hey, this guy's not eating. Like, what's happening?" And so on and so forth. And probably 20 years ago, the environment in Canada and North America was slightly different. I think people have a little bit more knowledge right now. But I always considered myself a very private person, and I considered faith to be a private thing. But alhamdulillah, in the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to see how being authentic to myself helps me be a much more effective leader because it helps me then coach people from the perspective of what are my values and give real examples from my own life and my experience versus building this facade of the something fake that I'm putting in front of them. It just allows me to be that much more authentic and effective as a leader because when you are coaching people, if you are authentic, you are much more likely to break through and inspire them. And that is something that I felt quite a bit. And it has also helped me stand up in situations for what I believed was right and how do I help and support people in that concept. Then maybe the third one, this idea of don't be a boss. I mean, as the visual shows, right? Like, you can either, if I oversimplify and keep it very binary, you can either be a boss who sort of like sits in the back and tells people what to do, or you can be a leader who is in the trenches. Role modeling is seen as one of the team, behaves non-hierarchically, and helps the team and helps people get things done. So it is for me, it is this has been one of the key lessons that I've learned from my mentors around like, of course, in some moments you have to be directive, in some moments you have to take a much more, let's say, formal position. But in general, I would say like 90+% of the time, effective leadership is about how do you inspire others and how do you lead others. Yeah. Then the bottom two, I share again, just in the spirit of like sharing very practical examples for professionals and others who are on this call. How do you build trust and how do you influence others? And those who know me, I see some familiar names in the attendee list here. Will not be surprised that I'm quoting these two examples, right? So maybe I'll talk first about trust, and then I'll talk about like how to influence others. So let's double click on trust. So if you go one slide forward. If you think about it, like how does a leader get people to move, and how do you make things happen? It is through trust. There's this fundamental principle of trust, and me being a little bit like a math nerd in my earlier days and just thinking about things somewhat formulaically, I thought it might be helpful to share this framework. I will take zero credit for inventing it. It is literally coming from a website that I happened to be exposed to, many years ago, and I found this framework really resonate. So if you think about it, how do you build, what does this framework say? How do you build genuine trust with others? It comes down to 4 dimensions, right? You have the mentioned here, CRINS. C is credibility. Credibility is about, are you knowledgeable? When people ask you questions, do you have a perspective? Is it coming from a place of like real expertise and credibility that allows you to, that people would say, oh, this person knows what they're talking about, right? So that would be the C part. The R part is reliability. Reliability basically means, do you consistently deliver? So, you're asked to do something, you're asked to do a task, or you make a commitment to do something. Are you reliably able to execute it? That's basically what that dimension is about. The third is intimacy. Intimacy means to what extent do you come across as a human being, I think is the most blunt way I can put it. So versus, someone who's like very buttoned up and like almost robotic, mechanical, and telling like, not exposing anything of like their true nature, or like, relaxing, laughing, and like, getting to know someone, etc. And then the last dimension, the S here, is self-orientation. To what extent are you all about you and what you want, and you kind of don't care what is the impact on the other person, right? So what does this framework kind of like help us with? In order to build trust, you want to do more on the C, R, and I, and less on the self-orientation. So you want to do more in the numerator and less in the denominator. So again, just think about it, right? If you want to build trust with someone, you can think about how do you enhance credibility, like talk from a place of expertise? How do you enhance reliability? How do you deliver, in other words, how do you deliver consistently? How do you build intimacy? Like help them like understand who you are, where you come from, and what you care about, and like connect as human beings. Sorry, somebody go back. Yeah, and then self-orientation. How do you be less self-centered and say what is about you, etc. And one reflection that I have now, I've been with McKinsey for about 13 years, working like multiple different countries, continents, different industries, and so on. I found this call it formula or this equation helpful, not as a way to scheme how to build trust, but as a way of reflecting on what is natural for you when you build trust as a leader versus what is not natural. And so again, I share with you, for me, when I was doing this, at least what I've seen is of the 4 dimensions, most leaders are great at 2. You could close your eyes and you will automatically be great at those 2. There's one you're pretty good at. And then there's one which by default you just are not inclined towards. And so for me, again, I mentioned I'm a private person. The intimacy part was always a challenge. And Alhamdulillah, when I thought and I reflected and used this framework and built my own confidence, I was able to then connect with people in an intimate way, right? So now when I work with other colleagues or with clients, etc., they see me more and more as sort of a human being. And so I talk to them about like, I'm playing cricket on the weekends. There's the stuff I'm doing with my family. We are hoping to go for Umrah this year. I have relatives who have gone for Hajj and I'm praying for them, etc. Like just these things that help you connect with people in a different way. And again, for each of us, which dimension is strong versus or more natural for us versus not will be different. So again, I just encourage you all to reflect. Then maybe Sumais, if you go to the next one on influencing others, that framework. Sorry, Sumais, if you go forward one more.
Race.
Thank you. That framework is around the influence model. Again, this is worth a Google search. Those of you who have led large transformational change will know it is the role of leaders to inspire people and get them to change their mindset and behaviors. Change does not happen, impact does not happen, the world does not move unless you change people's mindsets and their behaviors, which is like the core the core reason for being for leaders. And so what this framework what I've found is very helpful is it underlines 4 different ways to get people to change their mindset and behavior, right? So the first one, top left corner, is about role modeling. To what extent do we see leaders behaving differently and being like role models or exemplars for the thing that they want to achieve? Second one is about fostering understanding and conviction. To what extent do you as a leader take the time to explain to people what you are asking them to do, or why the goal is what the goal is, and why you built the journey the way you have, etc., and help them understand and address their concerns and questions, right? Third is reinforcing with formal mechanisms. Often as a leader, as I mentioned, it's a lot about soft power and inspiring, etc. But there are cases where you can help as a leader to implement something formal, right? So for many of you in your careers, even if you are not a very senior person, you can approach your company to build some kind of recognition program, some kind of the involvement program for employees, so that there is a formal mechanism to recognize people who are doing things differently. And you as a leader can help make that happen. Yeah. And then the last one is developing talents and skills. I mean, it is a principle of human nature that we are both resistant to change, but at the same time yearning it and yearning to grow, right? And I think we all have our own cycles when we are sometimes more resistant because there's stuff happening in our lives and we crave stability, or there are moments where we are, I'll say either bored of our job or like not feeling professionally fulfilled, where we can take a challenge and use that to develop. And I think it is on us as leaders to figure out which person is in which space and how to inspire them. And often that can be through talent development and skills, etc. And so again, this one I'll say like was a framework that McKinsey has popularized over the last 10, 15 years. And so I've used it a lot. I'm very clearly biased, but I found it helpful for how I lead teams and how I coach my clients to lead teams. Then maybe the last page, and then happy to take questions, etc. This one, I will say, if you take one thing away, this will be my most important message. And it is a principle that I try to impart in all of my work as well. The most important leadership mindset is that you have to remember a whisper from above is heard as a shout from below. So the way leaders behave, the way they conduct themselves, the things they say, the things they choose not to say have such a magnifying and amplifying impact, whether it's a positive thing or even more so when it's a negative thing. And so, my advice to you all on leading from a principles basis is be mindful of what you say and how you behave and how much you represent our community. So, for example, again, here in North America and North America and the West, etc., we're seeing a massive, massive rise in Islamophobia, right? There have been, I mean, without going into the details, there have been violent incidents in literally the last week, the last few months, etc. And I think we, inshallah, have the ability as a community to be leaders and to help our community also feel led by role modeling some of these skills and some of these techniques and being like a bigger portion of our communities rather than again I point the finger at myself rather than being a very private individual who just sort of lives their own life, etc. And again, there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just trying to encourage us to all be leaders in our communities, in our workplaces, in our families who are trying to make a good change. And so that's why I wanted to share just a little bit of advice when Maki Bhai asked me to. In the last 15 years or so, there have been many moments where I felt like I wasn't equipped for leadership. But subhanallah, Allah finds a way to give you the strength, the confidence, and also the advice of others to make your way through those difficult moments and help people lead. So with that, let me pause. Maybe Sumrez and Maki, I don't know if you want to pause for questions now or we do later. I'm open either way.
Thank you very much, Asad. I think let's take a question now where if anyone has a question, and then inshallah, then I can, let's take one question. Ji, Amar
Please,
Khan.
Amar.
Hello, assalamu alaikum, everyone. I do apologize on the bus right now, but thank you very, very much for the webinar. Just have one quick question. My question is surrounding, so essentially for a bit of context, I came across a quote that Muhammad Ali had where someone asked him what's the hardest part about being a leader, being a boxer, etc. And he said that it's avoiding the distractions. And that made me think about, when you try to do so many different things, try to build with Ihsan, you're trying to do consulting, you're trying to build a business, help other people, be a Muslim, etc. How do you go about avoiding those distractions, and how do you go about being in a position where you're not insecure to flaunt the things that you do? Jazakallah khairan.
Thank you, Amar. Look, I'll offer a perspective. I'll give the disclaimer that I'm not sure that it's the right perspective. In all of these matters, there's a spectrum of what is the right answer, and each person, it might be slightly different for each person. On the topic of avoiding distractions and let's say insecurity, I think the two bits of advice that I at least would give. Number one is to contribute in the places that you have passion. I at least have found if you अगर आप कोई चीज करना चाहें जिसमें आपका दिल नहीं लगता, it's just so difficult, so painful. It feels like such a burden to do it, etc. And so my advice is do the things that aren't distractions, do the things that you have passion for, that give you energy and excitement and so on, and just do those, and you will find ihsan, you will find ihsan in those things because of the passion and the energy that you have. So maybe that's one bit of advice on avoiding distraction. I think the second one for me is some of this comes with time. I mean, Alhamdulillah, like I said, I mentioned that I'm in 13 years now into McKinsey and about 20 years into my professional career. And Alhamdulillah, the network that comes with having worked in these fields and the opportunities that you get continue to scale as you gain more experience. And so that also is very clarifying. And so, for example, the things I'm doing now in 2026, I could not even have imagined in 2020 or 2019, I would have the opportunity to participate in some of these things. And so I try to be very thoughtful about making the most of those opportunities, but at the same time, not overly fixating on, well, I did this year and what do I need to do next year and the year after. It's all about, I think for me, appreciating the opportunities and the moments that you have right now and not over indexing. You mentioned a very important word, Amar, which is like the feeling of insecurity. I think the way I might phrase it is thinking about it as one's responsibility. What is one's responsibility? What does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala command us to do? And what is our responsibility as Muslims? Um, I don't think Allah demands perfection by any of us, right? Allah is Ghafoor. Allah forgives our mistakes. And so for me, it is about like what are the small things we can do to contribute and feel energy and excitement about, and not have them become distractions that distract us from the broader purpose, which is the hereafter, inshallah. Thank you for your question, Amar.
No worries, and Jazakallah khairan for the detailed answer. That helps a lot. So I really do appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, I think I'm just gonna Asad Saab present now, and then at the end we can take more questions.
Go ahead, Maki. You're on mute right now.
Okay, you guys can see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Acha ji. Thank you very much, Asad Saab. One thing I told Asad before the session, I think Asad आप भी present कर लें और मैं भी present कर लूँगा, and maybe we have the same principles. So I think we end up having some of the principles to be the same. Mashallah, I think I'm actually taking these principles more from the Islamic side, or mashallah, Asad Saab, through his experience, has reached the Islamic side also. So very good. Okay, so in my session, I'm just going to talk about 4 leadership principles, and these principles are kind of my experience. They are unstructured. They don't follow any framework. I wanted to use a framework, but जो मेरे दिल में आ रहा था, I've been leading teams since the last 5-6 years, managing projects. छोटी teams भी lead की, बड़ी teams भी lead की. I realized कि कुछ चीजें लोगों को बहुत पसंद आई. Over the years, I've noticed I got good feedback from the people who I was working with, and they said कि ये चीज आपकी अच्छी थी और इस तरह हमारे साथ अच्छा रहा, right? And there were some things which people did not like. So I kind of put them on the slide today, or actually I was using Claude. मैं उसको बता रहा था कि यार this is what I did and this is something I did, and Claude helped me kind of structure some of the points. But overall, these are my experiences, right? So I want to start with something that I learned from the professional world and something I wish the profession world taught me, right? And I don't blame the firms actually. I think probably अगर मैं वेस्ट में होता, अगर बहुत किसी अच्छी फर्म के साथ होता, तो मे बी इस तरह की ट्रेनिंग्स में ये चीजें मेंशन की जाती. लेकिन अनफॉर्चुनेटली the places I work with, I did not get these points, the one you see on the right, to be taught to people. So I learned to give feedback using forms, rating scales, structured or scheduled review cycles. बहुत अजीब अजीब किस्म के feedback forms अभी हम बैठ के उसको further refine कर रहे थे for the consulting firm I work for, किसमें impact का कोई scale डाल देते हैं, problem solving का, communication का, structured thinking का, और ये भी डाल देते हैं initiative ले रहा है कि नहीं ले रहा, और उसको हम further refine करी जा रहे थे, managers find it easy also. But I think the firms did not teach me to ask why someone is not doing well, right? We are ready to give a very structured kind of a negative feedback at times also, but kind of exploring कि ये बंदा क्यों नहीं सही परफॉर्म करा. इस तरह की बात कोई फीडबैक फॉर्म में नहीं आती कि टॉक टू हिम और हर अबाउट कि उसकी पर्सनल लाइफ में क्या चल रहा है जिसकी वजह से उसकी परफॉर्मेंस अच्छी नहीं जा रही, राइट? आई नो मेरा एक मैनेजर था McKinsey में बिफोर असद साहब. इट वाज बैक इन 2013-14. So I did not do well in something, and he sat me down and he started off by asking कि अभी मेरी recently शादी हुई थी, right? कोई महीने 2 महीने पहले. तो वैसे ही मैं थोड़ा dazed हुआ था. तो he sat down with me and he did not discuss the work. उसने ये नहीं पूछा कि ये सही नहीं हुआ, वो क्यों नहीं हुआ, why did ये नहीं सही तरह परफॉर्म क्यों नहीं किया. He just sat down and discussed कि देखो शादी हुई है तो क्या वर्क लाइफ बैलेंस मेंटेन हो रहा है. मैं कहा हो रहा है, but you know I'm kind of not prioritizing work at the moment. I'm kind of rushing home at 6 p.m. अच्छा तो बेगम को क्या समझ आ रही है. Look, he had a very detailed conversation with me, and then he kind of drifted to this point कि देखो काम की भी अपनी जगह है और लाइफ की भी अपनी जगह है. If you need some more days off, then you could take more days off, right? But understanding why the person is not doing well, that's not on the forms. That's something जो मैं एक बंदे से सीखता हूँ, and I've learned this from people. कि you know kind of develop this, what Asad was saying, intimate relationship with people, कि in which you know एक trust वाला relationship. The second thing is I learned to recognize performance through awards, bonuses, you know promotions मिल जाते हैं, tracking plus आ रहा है आपका. अभी हम बैठ के इसी तरह की रेटिंग बना रहे थे, राइट? बट यू नो लोगों की अच्छी स्ट्रेंथ्स को समझना, अप्रिशिएट करना और उसको आगे रिवॉर्ड करना फ्रॉम दैट परस्पेक्टिव, आई थिंक आई डिड नॉट लर्न दैट पार्ट आल्सो from structured ways, but I think from the people also, उनसे मैंने सीखा था. And you learn to manage client expectations, protect the firm relationship, you know कि भाई client है, impact create करना. I remember we were on a retreat, अभी नहीं 2-3 साल पहले हम एक retreat पे एक जगह पे गए हुए थे, skiing कर रहे थे. And then we got a call from the client, right? And he's like, hey, you know, I need this slide deck because we have this minister meeting coming up शाम 4 बजे. And I was in a very strange situation कि मैं क्या करूं, कि टीम को लेके बैठ जाऊं, आओ तुम लोग उतरो अपनी चेयर से, let's just sit down and develop this deck, या क्लाइंट को एक्सक्यूज कर दो, राइट? ऑब्वियसली फर्म ने तो यही सिखाया क्लाइंट को, आपने इम्पैक्ट को मैक्सिमाइज करना है, यू नो कि बट यू नो टेकिंग दिस डिसीजन कि जिससे आपकी रिट्रीट खराब हो जाए या लोगों का मूड खराब हो जाए. I think that was not taught to me, and that was something I learned from the people also, from a good managers also. Okay, how do you do this balance? How do you maintain this balance between people and client, right? एक pressurizing environment team के लिए नहीं बनाना. And I want to summarize this with कि how can we develop a relationship that lasts, right? मतलब मैं असद साहब के साथ देखें, हमारा जैसा भी हमने काम किया, you know, there were feedbacks, there was development areas को identify किया गया, you know, keeping everything aside, मैं कहता हूँ कि you know एक relationship जो मैंने असद साहब के साथ बनाया, I think that really matters, right? फीडबैक्स वगैरह और स्लाइड मेकिंग और प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग ठीक थी नहीं ठीक थी, डेक ठीक था नहीं ठीक था, वो स्ट्रक्चर तरीके से चला गया. लेकिन अगर एक लीडर ने एक अच्छा इंटीमेट रिलेशनशिप नहीं बनाया अपने बंदे के साथ, then I think that leader is not the leader. He was not able to lead me. He was not able to develop me. He was not able to have this trust with me that I can look up to that person and call him after 10 years, right? Ki Asad Saab, you know, we had this good relationship. Let's have these sessions. I think that really matters, and I'm kind of seeing this thing, you know, being phased out of the leaders and the you know the people working under the leaders also, right? अब मैं teams lead करता हूँ, मैं you know every now and then I think from 5 to 6 people I have on the team, एक ही बंदा होता है जो एक इस तरह का intimate relationship बनाना चाहता है. Everyone else is very focused on कि जो promotion देने की नहीं दे रहे आप मुझे. Are you rewarding me with the bonus or not? Are you telling me कि मेरा रिव्यू अच्छा जा रहा है कि नहीं जा रहा है, ये मुझे बताएं. Did you say anything good about me to the partners or not? I think people are more concerned about that rather than having this relationship factor in life. And I really want कि you know we focus on this thing कि हमारे relationships और हमारी एक ऐसी एक relationship रहे, एक लीडर ऐसा एक तरह काम करे कि people look up to that person, like कि मैंने ऐसा बनना है. You know, and that was the beauty of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say the Sahaba wanted to be like him. You know, he did not instruct and tell कि you know if you don't be like me, then you're in trouble, right? Or you know you're gonna have a tracking below tracking, या तुम्हारी negative performance या तुम्हारा bonus गिर जाएगा, तुम्हारी आखिरत में हालात खराब हो जाएंगे. Like people wanted to be like the Prophet, right? This is the miyar of the leadership that we need to have, and sadly I feel it's kind of going away. So I want to just you know highlight 4 leadership principles that I learned from people, and I'm kind of practicing on my own also. The first thing is I've learned that you know good leaders absorb the pressure. You know, the Asad Saab was at the end hinting towards this point कि you know whispers at the top and voices at the bottom, right? जो leaders messages देते हैं अपने लोगों को, you know उससे बहुत impact होता है. right? The instruction you give, the message you give, the way in which you give the message also. So बहुत फर्क पड़ता है, right? And this was the beauty of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Imagine his situation, right? He was the prophet. He was managing a lot of wives, mashallah. His children were dying. ठीक है. उनकी गोद में एक उनके बेटे की डेथ हुई. ठीक है. He was facing munafiqat from some people, and he was having wars with other people, right? इतनी परेशानी, इतनी टेंशन जिंदगी के अंदर, इतना प्रेशर, but still he did not take out or vent out his pressure and frustration on the Sahaba, जो कि हम बहुत करते हैं. I remember एक some manager of mine walked into the room और गुस्से में था और जोर से लैपटॉप बंद किया, टीम पे चीख रहा है कि तुम लोगों की वजह से ठीक नहीं हुआ, राइट? दिस इज अ डिड द प्रॉफिट एवर डू दैट, कि सहाबा को आके क्रिटिसाइज किया कि तुम लोगों ने वॉर में अच्छा नहीं किया? इन ओहद द आर्चर्स डिसोबेड द प्रॉफिट क्लीनली. उन्होंने मना किया था नबी ने कि आपने छोड़ना नहीं है. These 70 archers, you would not leave that place. ठीक है. And the prophet himself was wounded. ठीक है. And they lost a war. और इस्लाम का जो एक इमेज बना था बदर के बाद कि कि हम लोग ग्रो कर रहे हैं, वी आर अ ग्रोइंग पावर, वी कैन चैलेंज द कुफार आल्सो, वी कैन एक्सपैंड दिस रिलीजन इनटू न्यू होराइजंस, बट वो टूट गया. अब लीडर क्या करता है इस पॉइंट के ऊपर? I've seen leaders fall at this point, crumble at this point, और वो प्रेशर निकालते हैं आके अपनी टीम पे. ठीक है. क्या करते हैं? they kind of say कि तुम लोगों की गलती है. और जैसे मैं आपको मिसाल देता हूँ, ठीक है, let me just complete this one. तो अल्लाह ताला ने इसके ऊपर ना, इस पॉइंट के ऊपर वर्सेस निकाली, the way the Prophet reacted with Sahaba, which was with a lot of mercy. فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ फज़्ज़न गलीज़ल क़ल्बि लनफ़ज़्ज़ू मिन हौलिक. ठीक है, जो which translates into it is through mercy from Allah that you are gentle to them. ये ओहद के मौके के ऊपर when the prophet himself was wounded, बेचारे गिर गए और बेहोश हो गए. ठीक है. Had you been rough and hard-hearted, they would have dispersed from around you. तो अल्लाह ताला एक्चुअली प्रेज कर रहे हैं प्रॉफिट को कि तुमने इस पॉइंट पे भी उनके साथ मर्सी दिखाई, और ये मर्सी भी अल्लाह की तरफ से आई थी. सो पार्डन देम, सीक फॉरगिवनेस फॉर देम एंड कंसल्ट देम इन द मैटर. इमेजिन कि योर टीम स्क्रूड अप कंप्लीटली, मरवा दिया. क्लाइंट के आगे जो डेक प्रेजेंट किया हुआ तो उसमें बहुत मसले थे. मेरे साथ बड़ी दफा हुआ है. तैमूर झगड़ा साहब को उन्होंने बड़ा नाराज किया था एक दफा, क्योंकि डेटा एनालिसिस में बहुत इशू था, राइट? मरवा दिया हमने डिफिट के आगे, एफसीडीओ के आगे, राइट? तो अल्लाह हम क्या कह रहे हैं कि वॉर हरा दी है. अल्लाह ताला सेइंग सीक फॉरगिवनेस फॉर देम, पार्डन देम एंड कंसल्ट देम. नॉट इवन जस्ट पार्डन देम, कि उनसे मशवरा करते रहो. अल्लाह ताला उनका स्टेटस मेंटेन कर रहे हैं, राइट? सो एक लीडर का काम होता है कि अगर अभी मैं पिछले दिनों एक मीटिंग में बैठा हुआ था, and there's this new manager who was promoted somewhere, and I'm like an advisor on the project. तो वो जो मैनेजर था जो था ना, वो क्या कर रहा था, वो अपने एसोसिएट को इन अनदर एक बड़ी क्लाइंट मीटिंग में मरवा रहा था. ठीक है. वो कह रहा था कि देखो, जब क्लाइंट ने कहा कि ठीक नहीं हुआ, तो उसने एसोसिएट की तरफ इशारा करके कहा कि दिस इज योर फॉल्ट, राइट? फिर क्लाइंट ने ये कहा कि ठीक नहीं हुआ, तो उससे एसोसिएट के तरफ दोबारा इशारा करके कहा तुम्हारा दिस इज योर फॉल्ट, राइट? तो खुद अपने आप को डिस्टेंट कर रहा था, राइट? टेकिंग यू आउट ऑफ द इक्वेशन एंड सेइंग कि तुम दोनों का आपस में मसला है, मैं तो इसका पार्ट ही नहीं हूं ना. ठीक है. तो दिस इज नॉट व्हाट द लीडर इज. वो स्टैंड करता है, वो अपनी टीम के साथ स्टैंड करता है, उनको पार्डन करता है, उनके साथ खड़ा होता है. द प्रॉफिट हिमसेल्फ, लाइक असद वाज सेइंग, राइट? वो जो तस्वीर में दिखा रहे थे, लीडर हिमसेल्फ was like leading from the front, and this is what the prophet did. I actually thought about it कि prophet is a strategic advisor, maybe he should step back from the wars. और बदर में, ओहद में पीछे खड़े हुए, राइट? और खंदक के अंदर भी पीछे खड़े हुए. बट खंदक में भी मिलता है कि वो खड़े होकर पत्थर तोड़े थे. ओहद में भी मिलता है बेचारे आगे थे और उनके दांत शहीद हो गए. मेनी साहबा एक्चुअली ट्राई टू रन फ्रॉम द फील्ड. इफ यू रीड ओहद इन डिटेल, तो वो उन्होंने बैटलफील्ड छोड़ने की कोशिश की थी, कुछ भाग भी गए थे. ठीक है. एंड द प्रॉफिट वाज स्टिल देयर. the army is dispersing, running back, but the prophet is still there, जिसके अंदर उनके दांत शहीद हुए थे. उनके ऊपर एक हमला हुआ था बुरा किस्म का. And there were some sahaba, and अजीब देखो, there was some sahaba who was surrounding him, right? Anyway, so the leader is there. to absorb the pressure. And in practice, if I put this, do you pass on the pressure that you get from the client on the team? ठीक है, क्या आप अपनी टीम को कहते हैं कि बहुत मसला चल रहा है, हमने बहुत मसला हो गया, या समटाइम्स यू हैव टू वर्क हार्ड, आई एग्री, 15 16 18 घंटे काम करना पड़ता है, बट क्या आप काम दे के गायब हो जाते हैं या उनके साथ रहते हैं? क्या आप उनके साथ चेक इन करें कि नहीं करें? क्या आप उनके साथ इंटीमेट रिलेशनशिप रखने की रखते हैं? आई वाज ट्राई टू मेक श्योर, राइट, कि अगर मेरी टीम सैटरडे संडे को काम करती है तो आई वाज अश्योर देम, स्पेशली द मैरिड कॉलीग्स, राइट, अगर कोई फीमेल्स हैं तो उनको हमेशा कहते हैं you can take a day off, right? You आप Saturday को अगर काम कर रहे हैं, Tuesday को ले लें, Wednesday को ले लें, right? So try to create the situation. How do you react when they miss a deadline? How do you react when you find mistakes in the analysis, right? आपको मौका मिल जाता है. You find this opportunity कि मैं बेसिक करूँ. Sometimes, there is this, and this is just my experiences. There is a pressure on the manager to contribute something, वो एक और लड़का जो कि कंसल्टिंग फर्म में काम करता है, वो मुझे कहता है इट्स वेरी हार्ड फॉर मी टू वॉक इनटू दैट पीएस सेशन एंड कंट्रीब्यूट समथिंग, वर्क स्ट्रीम्स का रिव्यू हो रहा है एंड आई हैव टू गिव अ टेक्निकल इनपुट जिसके ऊपर सारे कहें यार वाह पार्टनर होता है, ठीक है, इसका इनपुट चाहिए था हमें, राइट? कहता है कि इट्स वेरी हार्ड फॉर मी. अब उसके अंदर, उस प्रेशर के अंदर, डू यू स्टार्ट क्रिटिसाइजिंग फॉर नो रीजन? एंड आई हैव सीन लाइक पीपल क्रिटिसाइजिंग फॉर नो रीजन, और उसके बाद जैसे ही वो बंदा उठ के जाता है तो लोग कहते हैं यार हिज इनपुट वाज नॉट रेलेवेंट एट ऑल, right? So you have to absorb the pressure and you have to let the team be at times, and हाँ कभी कभार आपको टफ होना पड़ता है, बट आई थिंक जो एक डोमिनेंट मिजाज अल्लाह ताला ने भी अपना कहा है, विच इज अर्रहमान अर्रहीम, और हमारे नबी का भी तो एक डोमिनेंट मिजाज था, टू बी फॉरगिविंग, और हमारा भी एक डोमिनेंट मिजाज ये होना चाहिए, टू बी फॉरगिविंग, राइट? Give more chances to people, right? So that was the first thing I learned from living with good managers. The second thing I learned is, which Asad Saab, talked about, intimate relationship, is to know your team, know your people, right? और इसके अंदर अगर मैं बात करूंगा कि you know your team's strengths, weaknesses, and what drives each of them. Or in good consulting firms, they've developed this formal structures के लोगों का MBTI टेस्ट करेंगे, ओ ही इज एन ई, ही इज एन आई रिमेम्बर कुछ मेरे मैनेजर से वो कहते थे कि जी इफ यू कैन नॉट वर्क सिटिंग इन अ टीम रूम देन अकेले बैठ के काम करो. जस्ट अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि कौन किसको क्या चीज सूट करती है, राइट? अंडरस्टैंडिंग कौन मैरिड है कौन नहीं है, अंडरस्टैंडिंग कौन प्रेशर से गुजर रहा है कि नहीं गुजर रहा, अंडरस्टैंडिंग कि किसकी क्या लिमिट्स है नहीं है, राइट? सो दिस इज व्हाट द प्रॉफिट आल्सो डिड, राइट? एंड प्रॉफिट क्या इतना इंटेंस था, intimate relationship with his Sahaba, right? So Amr bin al-As was a very famous Sahabi, और इनके जो बेटे हैं, खैर अमर बिन अलास जो थे, he actually went to Egypt, he conquered Egypt, he accepted Islam, ठीक है? इस्लाम एक्सेप्ट करने के बाद प्रॉफिट मेड हिम एक आर्मी का ना लीड बना दिया, इस्लाम एक्सेप्ट होने को थोड़ी देर बाद ही, बिकॉज ही वाज एन इन्फ्लुएंशियल पर्सन, राइट? सो ही सेड आई केम टू हिम एंड सेड हु इज द मोस्ट बिलवेड टू यू, राइट? अब उनको लग रहा था कि मैंने इस्लाम कबूल किया है और मुझे आर्मी का एक लीड बना दिया है, तो अब मैं तो फेवरेट होऊंगा, राइट? दिस इज द रीजन व्हाई आई वाज मेड द लीड, राइट? तो ही सेड आयशा. अब मैं ये भी सोच रहा था कि कौन अपनी, मैं सुमरेश भाई से पूछूं, सुमरेश भाई कौन सबसे इन्फ्लुएंशियल पर्सन है, कौन सबसे अच्छा लगता है? वो कह राया, ठीक है, अपनी वाइफ के नाम ले, राइट? वो थोड़ा अजीब भी लगेगा, लेकिन माशाल्लाह सुमरेश भाई इज मैरिड, तो बट दिस इज द लव ऑफ द प्रॉफिट फॉर हिज wife, right? He was so expressive. He said Aisha, and then it's not ending. And then among the men, he's like, okay, शायद वो उन्होंने अभी मेरे बारे में सोचा नहीं. Let's expand the scope and think about all the humanity. शायद नए आदमियों में आ जाओ, right? So he said among the men, he said her father. ठीक है. अच्छा, अबू बकर भी नहीं कहा her father, which means कि हज़रत आयशा से इतनी प्यारी एसोसिएशन थी द प्रॉफिट को, कि ही सेड कि उनके वालिद, हजरत आयशा के वालिद, ही इज नॉट फॉरगेटिंग आयशा. पीपल मेक अ लॉट ऑफ फस अबाउट द एज ऑफ हजरत आयशा. हजरत आयशा की एज का ये रिस्पॉन्स है आपके सामने हदीस, राइट? कि ही वाज इन मैडली इन लव विद हजरत आयशा, सो मच सो कि हजरत आयशा जब उनके बारे में याद करती थी ना, तो शी वुड स्माइल, राइट? शी वुड ब्लश अबाउट द प्रॉफिट कि कितना वो मोहब्बत करते थे, राइट? और जो लोग कहते हैं ना, वो फ्रॉम दैट परस्पेक्टिव सोचते हैं कि एज डिफरेंस इतना था और ये तो गलत था, ये तो अब्यूज था, दे टेक इट, दे टेक द कन्वर्सेशन टुवर्ड्स अब्यूज, राइट? जो बंदा अब्यूज हुआ होता है ना, वो इस तरह की बातें नहीं करता, ना अब्यूजर इस तरह की बातें करता है, राइट? जो अब्यूज हुआ होता है ना, वो उसको पीटीएसडी हुआ होता है, ही हैज और शी हैज पोस्ट ट्रॉमेटिक स्ट्रेस डिसऑर्डर, दैट पर्सन हैज डिप्रेशन, दैट पर्सन हैज एंजाइटी, राइट? हजरत आयशा जब भी नबी को याद करती थी मुस्कुराती थी, and she would long to be with the prophet, right? But anyways, and he then said, then Umar bin Hazrat Khattab, and then he named other men. But Hazrat Amr bin Alas को ये फीलिंग इसलिए हुई थी कि नबी वसल्लम जिस तरह बात करते थे और जिस तरह अटेंशन पे करते थे सहाबा को ये लगता था कि हम शायद, मैं ही फेवरेट, हर बंदे को ये लगता था कि मे बी आई एम द मोस्ट फेवरेट पर्सन of the Prophet ﷺ, right? Or I'll add another example here. Abu Zar al-Ghafari, he's a very interesting character. If you get time to read about him, तो जरूर किया कि collapsed from exhaustion, right? His camel. He loaded his belonging onto the back and walked alone through the burning desert to rejoin the army. When a companion spotted a lone figure in the distance, the Prophet ﷺ said, without hesitation, may it be Abu Zar, right? नबी वसल्लम को दूर से एक सहाबी का, imagine thousands of people are with the prophet, thousands of companions, ठीक है, 10,000 से भी ऊपर चले गए फतह मक्का के वक्त, एंड दूर से वो एक बंदे को देख के कह रहे हैं कि ये अबू जर अल गफारी है। इमेजिन वो कितना अटेंशन देते हैं अपने साहबियों को। आपने ये हदीसें सुनी है ना कि एक कोई साहबी आए, उनको नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि आप गुस्से पे कंट्रोल करें, आप जन्नत पहुंच जाएंगे। एक साहबी आए, उनको नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा कि जी आप 5 वक्त की नमाजें पढ़े, आप जन्नत में पहुंच जाओगे। एक साहबी आए, उनको कहा कि अच्छे इखलाक करेंगे तो आप जन्नत में पहुंच जाओगे। हाउ वाज और व्हाई वाज द प्रॉफिट डूइंग दैट? बिकॉज ही न्यू द बैकग्राउंड ऑफ ईच एंड एवरी पर्सन, कि इस बंदे को ये इशू है, इस बंदे को ये इशू है, ये बंदा इससे स्ट्रगल कर रहा है, राइट? दिस इज द इंटीमेट रिलेशनशिप दैट वी नीड टू हैव विद आवर टीम। हमारा रिलेशनशिप ना बड़ा एक फॉर्मल स्ट्रक्चर बन गया है, राइट? सो वी हैव टू मूव बियॉन्ड द फॉर्मल स्ट्रक्चर ऑफ फीडबैक, रिव्यूज एंड प्रमोशंस, राइट? कि जो वो फीडबैक फॉर्म कह रहा है, जो 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 एक गोल सेटिंग वाला फॉर्म कह रहा है, हमें उससे मूव करना है बियॉन्ड, और थोड़ा सा ना वन टू वन डिस्कशंस करनी लोगों के साथ कि तुम कौन हो, तुम क्या करते हो, तुम्हारे क्या प्लान्स हैं, तुम्हारे अंदर क्या मसला चल रहा है। Just make these relationships. I think it's going to benefit a lot, right? Like the Prophet did, like he did with the Sahaba, right? So this is the know your people part. The third is consult your team. ठीक है, इसके अंदर ये मेंशन करूंगा कि very quickly, you do not decide alone, you bring your team into the thinking before committing a direction, right? I think great leaders do that. Like I said कि कभी कभार पार्टनर्स और एक्सपर्ट्स किसी पार्टनर को पॉइंट आउट नहीं कर रहा, आई जस्ट वाज इन सम सिचुएशन जहां पे ये हुआ था, दे फील प्रेशराइज्ड टू गिव एन ओपिनियन विदाउट लिसनिंग टू अदर्स, राइट? तो बट द प्रॉफिट सिस्टम वाज instructed by Allah Ta'ala to seek mashwara, to seek the opinion of the Sahaba. इसके अंदर कुछ कमी नहीं होती, और जब उनको इंस्ट्रक्ट कर दिया गया, and consult them in the matter, then when you have decided, put your trust in Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. अल्लाह ने डायरेक्ट नबी को कह दिया कि आप मशवरा करें इनके साथ, आप इनका ओपिनियन सुने, राइट? और इतने ओपिनियंस आपको नजर आते हैं नबी की जिंदगी में कि आपने शायद ट्रीटी ऑफ हुदैबिया का पढ़ा था कि जब वो गए और वहां पे जाके बात की उन्होंने कुफार मक्का से कि लेट अस एंटर, लेट अस डू द उम्रा, दे रिफ्यूज, दे सेड कि वी विल नॉट लेट यू कम। अब वो सारे एहराम में थे, नबी के साथ थे सहाबा, नबी भी एहराम में थे कि अब आ गए हैं, उम्रा हमने करना था, अब हम क्या करें, एहराम तो हम उतार नहीं सकते बिकॉज दिस इज अ कमांडमेंट ऑफ अल्लाह ताला कि हम उम्रा करके उतार सकते हैं। वेरी सैड, एंड द प्रोफेसर वाज आल्सो सैड। वो ये होता है ना कि सारे चुप करके बैठे होते हैं यार, गुस्से में होते हैं, परेशान होते हैं, फ्रस्ट्रेटेड होते हैं, एक बड़ा प्लान हुआ होता है, कैंसिल हुआ होता है, राइट? एंड सब बैठ के कह रहे हैं यार क्या सीन, अब क्या करें हम लोग, राइट? कुछ फ्रस्ट्रेशन थी माहौल में। द प्रोफेसर वेंट टू हिज वाइफ उम्मे सलमा, राइट, एंड ही कंसल्टेंट हर कि अब इस तरह है तो क्या करें, मैं क्या करूं, मैं सहाबा का मूड कैसा अच्छा करूं, राइट? वी रेडी टू गो बैक टू मदीना, तो अब हम क्या करें? तो उन्होंने बताया कि व्हाई डोंट यू ओपन योर एहराम and the others would follow suit, right? Go out and sacrifice and open your ihram. People will see. लोगों को नजर आएगा, आप उनको कहें मत, don't tell them to do it, right? People will see that you've opened your ihram, right? You've shaved your head, then others will do it. अब he, did mashwara with Salama, his wife, राइट? अपने फैमिली मेंबर से, अपने कॉलीग से हमारे अंदर ये आदत होनी चाहिए, क्योंकि हमेशा दे हैव अ डिफरेंट ओपिनियन, पीपल आर डिफरेंट, पीपल हैव डिफरेंट वेज ऑफ थिंकिंग। एमबीटीआई टेस्टिंग यही बताती है, कुछ स्ट्रक्चर्ड सोच रहे होते हैं, कुछ अनस्ट्रक्चर्ड सोच रहे होते हैं, कुछ परसेप्टिव होते हैं, कुछ नॉन परसेप्टिव होते हैं, कुछ लॉजिकल सोच रहे होते हैं, कुछ फीलिंग्स की बेसिस पर सोच रहे होते हैं। इट्स ऑलवेज गुड टू सीक ओपिनियन फ्रॉम अदर्स, चाहे वो कोई लाइक कुछ छोटे, दिस इज अ प्रॉब्लम सॉल्विंग सेशन ऑल्सो, राइट, कि वी सिट टुगेदर एंड वी वे एक्चुअली बात इस तरह करते हैं, राइट, सो दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट। Acha. So this is the practice before a major project decision. I think you need to consult your team, right? उनको confidence मिले, ताकि अगर वो decision गलत भी हो जाए ना, then you actually have your team in confidence. Team आपको बाद में blame ना करे, हमारी बात सुनता नहीं है, ठीक है? He took the decision and उसकी वजह से हुआ है, तो हम तो उसको partake नहीं करेंगे इस decision में। तो this is the third thing, and the final thing that I have is basically give feedback that uplifts, right? अगर आपने feedback देना है ना, I would say कि prioritize positive feedback over negative. Negative भी दें, लेकिन नबी सिस्टम का मिजाज positive का काफी था, right? You never, और जब भी आपको किसी में कोई positive बात नजर आए ना, आप जरूर बताएं। किसी ने कोई डेक अच्छा बनाया, जरूर बताएं यार। वो एक आपका छोटी सी ईमेल ना, एक छोटा सा मैसेज, ग्रेट डेक, ग्रेट वर्क, आई रियली लाइक इट, आई रियली लाइक स्लाइड 12 एंड 13, we can work on slide 14, right? कुछ इस तरह की बात, but these small things actually लोगों का दिल बहुत रख लेती हैं। They actually feel so positive about their work, right? उनको समझ आता है कि हाँ, someone is actually appreciating, right? एक मेरा मैनेजर था, वो हमेशा क्या करता था, पहले बैठ के 5-6 सही बातें बताता कि ये अच्छा किया है, ये ठीक किया था, ये एनालिसिस अच्छा था, एंड देन ही वुड कम टू दिस पॉइंट ऑफ कि ये चीज ठीक नहीं हुई थी, राइट? let people discover their positive areas, so that कुछ लोग consulting में they don't live for long, but at least they should have these memories कि मैं इन चीजों में अच्छा था, I was appreciated for these kinds of analysis, not told always कि तुम्हारा ये वाली structured thinking ठीक नहीं थी, और तुमने डेक्स strategic deck अच्छे नहीं बनाए, maybe data analysis उसका बहुत अच्छा एक वो था, art, so that that person knows कि beyond this consulting life or beyond this firm जिसमें मैं काम कर रहा हूँ, मेरा कुछ और भी फील्ड है जहां पे मैं जाके पॉजिटिव चीजें कर सकता हूँ। इट्स नॉट जस्ट दिस थिंग, राइट? सो एंड वेरी क्विकली ऑन दिस एंड देन विल एंड इंशाल्लाह, ठीक है? Yeah, so very, very quick. The Prophet once told a companion, you have two qualities that Allah loves, forbearance and deliberateness. He said, O Messenger of Allah, I was born with them, or are they acquired? He said, no, rather it is something that you were born with, right? तो अजीब बात नबी सिस्टम एक तो तारीफ कर रहे हैं, और दूसरा मैं आपको एक बड़ी एक स्पिरिचुअल बात बताऊं। देखो, कुरान में भी आता है, कद अफलह मन ज़क्काहा व कद खाब मन दस्साहा। सक्सेसफुल इज द वन हु हैज प्योरिफाइड हिमसेल्फ, एंड वो लॉस में चला गया या वो लूजर हो गया वो बंदा जिसने अपने सेल्फ को खराब कर दिया। सो एवरी पर्सन हैज गुड क्वालिटीज एंड बैड क्वालिटीज। अल्लाह से ना कभी बार गुड क्वालिटीज मांगे कि अल्लाह ताला, आई डोंट हैव दिस गुड क्वालिटी, प्लीज गिव मी दिस गुड क्वालिटी, सो बिकॉज दिस इज कमिंग फ्रॉम अल्लाह सुब्हानहू व तआला। if you don't have forbearance, if you don't have patience, if you don't have this intimate relationship wali feeling, तो अल्लाह से मांगे, अल्लाह ताला, I am not able to develop this, अल्लाह ताला, I am not able to do this, I am not able to do that, आप मुझे दें, right? So अल्लाह ताला देंगे, right? Because this is coming from अल्लाह ताला, right? और एक आपको छोटा सा एक मैं हदीस सुना के खत्म करता हूँ कि किस तरह नबी सल्लल्लाहु पॉजिटिव फीडबैक देते थे लोगों को। In the Prophet's era, it's a very interesting hadith, or there are many strange points to this. In the Prophet's area, whoever saw a dream would narrate to the messenger, right? कोई भी जब ख्वाब देख लेता था ना, वो जाके नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम को बताता था, नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम मैंने एक ख्वाब देखा है, नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम उसी ताबीर वगैरह बता, इंटरप्रिटेशन बता देते थे, राइट? सो एक सहाबी थे, आई थिंक अब्दुल्लाह बिन उमर थे, आई एम फॉरगेटिंग हिज नेम, जिनका मैंने नाम अभी नहीं लिया, and he said, I had a wish of seeing a dream to narrate to the messenger. Imagine, अब आप सोचें कि द प्रॉफिट इज अराउंड, और इस तरह सोच लें कोई सीनियर पार्टनर आया है बहुत बड़ा की कंपनी का, असद साहब पाकिस्तान आए हुए और हम सारे बैठे हुए हैं, एंड आई वुड वांट टू हैव दिस वन ऑन वन सेशन विद असद साहब एंड डिस्कस कि मैं क्या करना चाहता हूँ, राइट? आगे and the prophecy was there and people wanted to talk to him, कोई मौका ढूंढते थे ना, यार मैं जाके कोई बात करूं, एंड he's like, यार मैं भी जाके ना कोई ख्वाब देखूं ताकि मैं सिस्टम को बताऊं जाके मैंने ख्वाब देखा, मौका मिल गया ना, to talk to this great personality. So I had a wish of seeing a dream to narrate to the messenger. I saw in the dream that two angels caught hold of me and took me to the fire. Right? Allah maaf kare, unko jo dream aa gayi. And he was actually sleeping in Masjid an-Nabi. ठीक है? He said कि I was sleeping in the masjid. I'm omitting that part. But he said I was sleeping in Masjid an-Nabi and I saw this dream कि दो angels ने मुझे पकड़ा है और वो मुझे एक फायर की तरफ ले गए, which was built all round like a built well. किसी कुएं टाइप सिचुएशन थी, उससे आग निकल रही थी और मुझे जो एंजल्स है ना पकड़ के लेके जा रहे हैं. ठीक है. I started saying, I seek refuge with Allah from this fire. A'udhu billah minal nar. A'udhu billah minal nar. मैंने कहना शुरू कर दिया, अल्लाह ताला मैं पनाह मांगता हूँ. I seek your refuge. अल्लाह ताला मुझे इस आग से बचा दें. So this is all happening in the dream, right? And then I met another angel who told me not to be afraid. ठीक है. और यहाँ पे उनका ड्रीम खत्म हो जाता है कि जब वो लेके जा रहे थे तो एक और एंजल बीच में आता है और वो कहता है कि तुम डरो मत. ठीक है. अब क्वेश्चन था कि मैं नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के पास ये ड्रीम कैसे लेके जाऊं. ठीक है. लोग तो बड़े अच्छे अच्छे ड्रीम लेके जा रहे थे, अब मैं कैसे ये ड्रीम लेके चला जाऊं. तो उन्होंने क्या किया, आई नैरेटेड द ड्रीम टू हफ्जा हु टोल्ड इट टू अल्लाह's मैसेंजर. क्या अब मैं कहते मैं उनको तो नहीं लेके जा सकता, तो पता नहीं मुझे क्या कहते हैं, यार तुम कितने गुनाह कर रहे हो, कितनी खराबियां तुम्हारे अंदर जिसकी वजह से तुम्हें आग नजर आ रही. तो मैंने हजरत हफ्जा को बताया कि अब बताना तो है, इंटरप्रिटेशन तो लो, पता नहीं क्या ही गलत काम हो रहा है. ठीक है. तो आई टोल्ड इट टू हफ्जा हु वाज द वाइफ ऑफ द प्रॉफिट सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम, डॉटर ऑफ हजरत उमर, कि आप जाके प्लीज पूछ लें कि इसका क्या मतलब है. द प्रॉफिट सेड अब्दुल्ला इज अ गुड मैन, आई विश ही प्रेड तहज्जुद. नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने ऐसा नहीं कहा कि देखो ये बंदे के आमाल खराब है इसकी वजह से इसको आग नजर आई, ये बंदा बुरा है जिसकी वजह से इसको आग नजर आई, इस बंदे में झूठ की खराबी है, इसके अंदर ये खराबी है. नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम ने कहा नेमल अब्द, बड़ा ही अच्छा बंदा है. इसी है ना अरबी जो है ना, नेमल अब्द इज अ वेरी गुड मैन, इसको इस तरह ट्रांसलेट करते हैं, राइट. और भी अच्छा हो सकता है अगर वो तहज्जुद की नमाज पढ़ ले. आफ्टर दैट अब्दुल्ला यूज्ड टू स्लीप बट अ लिटिल एट नाइट. कहते हैं आज के बाद से ना मैंने बहुत ही कम सोआ और रातों को उठ के मैं तहज्जुद पढ़ता था, राइट. बट द वे द प्रोसेस गेव फीडबैक, राइट, ही गेव फीडबैक इन अ वेरी पॉजिटिव मैनर कि कि कितना ही अच्छा बंदा है, और भी अच्छा हो सकता है कि अगर तहज्जुद पढ़ ले. एज अ लीडर, एज अ मैनेजर ऑफ द टीम, हम लोग देखें कि हम कैसे फीडबैक देते हैं. क्या वो फीडबैक फॉर्म से शुरू करते हैं बात और एंड में वो इस तरह खत्म करते हैं कि you're not qualified or you're not this or you're that. Even if you have, I've been involved a lot of CTLs, or which is like asking the people to leave the firm, right, in पिछले 5-6 सालों में. But I think I ended up developing good relationships with them anyways, right? Because I think it's beyond the feedback form. You have to have these discussions. कि I know you were struggling. I know you were not doing well. I know कोई मसला चल रहा होगा. I know तुम परेशान थे. I know तुम्हारे पे कोई pressure होगा. I know कुछ और मसला था. And there were some people who, realized and actually needed that discussion with me before leaving that firm कि कुछ मसला था, and they were not open to the people about it. They were not revealing it to HR. They were not telling to people. I know there was someone who was very परेशान because of his personal life, and he could not tell it to HR, or he could not perform, and he could not work anymore, right? अगर हम इस तरह में उसके सामने feedback form रखते और कहता कि you're not good enough, just leave the place now. So I think I would have caused damage to that person. हाँ, उसको बैठ के समझना कि हाँ, आई नो इट वाज डिफिकल्ट फॉर यू, आई नो यू स्ट्रगलिंग एट योर प्राइवेट साइड, राइट. इट्स फाइन, अल्लाह और अपॉर्चुनिटीज देगा, अल्लाह और रास्ते खोलेगा. जो मेहनत करता है अल्लाह ताला उसके लिए आसानी करता है, जो फैमिली की वजह से परेशान है उसको गुनाह माफ हो रहे हैं. इस तरह की 4-5 छोटी मोटी बातें, आई थिंक दैट गोज अ लॉन्ग वे, राइट. So I think this was something that I learned, right? I would highly encourage you guys, कि आप नबी की जिंदगी को समझें. And one beautiful, very beautiful series of lectures is Sheikh Yasir Qazi's amazing lectures in which he explains the life of the Prophet, all these encounters I have told, ओहद के वाकयात. बहुत लंबी सीरीज है लेकिन ये इतनी एडिक्टिव है कि once you start listening to it ना, आप hooked हो जाएंगे, आप छोड़ेंगे नहीं, आप कहेंगे मुझे इतना मजा आ रहा है, right? But learn the life of the Prophet, learn to manage like him, learn to lead like him. राइट. ओहद के अंदर ना जब वो नबी खड़े हुए थे ना, एंड में जब अकेले रह गए थे, तो कहते हैं वो अकेले खड़े हुए थे और उनके साथ में एक सहाबी इस तरह खड़े हुए थे एक साहब इस तरह खड़े हुए थे, एक साहब इस तरह खड़े हुए थे, एक साहब इस तरह खड़े हुए थे, लाइक फोर ने ना एक वॉल बनाई हुई थी कवरिंग द प्रॉफिट, राइट, कि हमारी जान कुर्बान, और वो कह रहे थे साहब कि दूर से तीर आ रहे हैं, वी वर प्रोटेक्टिंग द प्रॉफिट विद आवर शील्ड्स एंड विद आवर बॉडीज एंड नॉट लेट द प्रॉफिट बी हर्ट। ऐसा ट्रस्ट, ऐसा रिलेशनशिप हम कैसे बनाएं, राइट, कि योर टीम इज विलिंग टू स्टैंड विद यू in difficult times, right? This is what we have to learn from the life of the Prophet, right? Or I would highly encourage कि आप ये पढ़ें. Um, and before I conclude, I really want you guys to register for the LinkedIn page. इसके ऊपर हम लोग इन सेशन की समरीज वगैरह डालते रहेंगे और डिफरेंट चीज़ें हम लोग अपलोड करेंगे। हमने कुछ पब्लिकेशंस भी करनी है, कुछ एकेडमिक पेपर्स भी डालने हैं। खुद ये लाइक ये सेशन था, इसका एक हम एकेडमिक पेपर या समरीज पेपर हम डालेंगे। इट वुड बी वेरी बेनिफिशियल फॉर you guys and for other people you can share with, right? But Jazakallah, and this is what I had to share. Sorry, it was a bit unstructured, a bit more like dil ki baatein, but this is what I had to share. Ji, now let's open the for Q&A. Ji, questions. Ji, Amar.
Assalamualaikum. Jazakallah khairan again for your presentation. I appreciate it. Unfortunately, my Urdu is quite broken, so I'll stick to English for now. Inshallah, I'll learn it soon. But my question was, I for a bit of context, I really, really liked how you tied in Islam, the stories of the Sahaba and the Prophet into business. And I really do appreciate that. I wanted to ask you, what's your favorite story of, either leadership or business, something of this nature within Islam happening apart from these, or like even your personal favorite?
Within Islam?
Yes. So for example, the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's leadership or him trying to pursue excellence, something of that nature. Your favorite story scenario.
So I think I'm more towards the hadith side, right? Which I love studying hadith, which are like small pieces of advice that the Prophet gave. And I think the one that I mentioned, which was this Hazrat Abdullah seeing the dream and just very scared, and how the Prophet reacted with him. I think these small hadiths kind of motivate me a lot, right? Just being very nice with people, I think, especially if they're pareshan, if they're very worried, right? I think this is it. Ji Fazan.
Salam Makki bhai, just a small question. In terms of leadership, how do you manage conflict when there are like 3 or 4 people with different opinions and you are steering the group along? So what should the approach be like?
मेरी तो लड़ाई हो जाती जी। असद साहब आप बताएं।
No, no, look, it's situational, but look, I'd say, like you can think of like what is the path to take to lead the team to a solution, right? So you can either attack the problem with logic, or you can attack the problem with like the structure, logos, pathos, ethos, wala scene up kar sakte hain. So that might be one way of thinking about it. But at least what I found is like. Not addressing conflict is way worse than addressing it and feeling the pain for maybe 1 or 2 heated conversations over the course of 1 or 2 days, because like not addressing conflict just like festers and festers and festers, and then it creates a toxic environment. And then back to what Maki Bhai was saying, then you can't lead the team because there's a toxic environment. People don't feel safe, they don't feel you as a leader are not absorbing, you're like amplifying, etc. So those were 2 pieces of advice, like confront it head on and think about like what is a way to take the emotion out of the conflict by being very fact based or being very logic or structure based.
Yes, जी शाहरुख।
जी अस्सलाम वालेकुम, जज़ाकल्लाह, बहुत ही बेहतरीन सेशन था, and I'm trying to still like process all of the great advice. I think I just want to take a bit of a contrarian view थोड़ा सा, यानी कि मेरा I want to challenge my own takeaway from this session कि यार बहुत simple takeaway कि यार generally just be nice, be a good human being, ठीक है, और उसके obviously different ways to do that. लेकिन थोड़ा सा जो मेरा अपना experience है over the past few years, I found कि यार दुनिया इतनी अच्छी है नहीं, right? I think थोड़ा सा if you're just too nice, right, you become a pushover as well, right? So I definitely appreciate, and I think मैं mindset से बहुत ज्यादा agree करता हूँ. लेकिन I've also been caught like more than a couple of times in a situation जहाँ पे जैसे असद आपने बात की वो जो equation थी self orientation की, जैसा मैं उसको understand कर रहा हूँ कि यार कि in your relationships to not be self-oriented, right? Lekin at the same time, I think there is this point about you have to fill your own bucket. You have to also look out for your own health, your own boundaries. Otherwise, it's a dog world as well, right? दुनिया इतनी अच्छी है नहीं, right? So I'm just trying to figure out, what's the right mindset, not behaviors I think uska outcome hai, lekin more like mindset to keep in this situation जहाँ पे obviously you have to pursue excellence, you have to build that trust equation, be a leader, but at the same time also not be a pushover.
Yeah. Look, it's a very interesting point, Shahrukh. What I'll say is you will come across, and many of you might have, right? You will come across in your career people with whom you just cannot build trust because you're not coming from a place of common understanding, or there is an active resistance to wanting to build trust. And like those situations happen in a professional context. They happen sometimes in like consultant and client. They happen within the team, etc. Just kind of have to get through it. Would be my thought and my advice. And then what I might say is the more important thing in those is to try to diagnose what is happening, and then just be convinced that you will not have regrets later, right? Because because at least like again like if I think about like the teammates with whom I felt I just was not enough. I was struggling to lead them. The lesson I took away afterwards was that yes, I made some mistakes. Yes, I have some regrets, but I learned from that experience, and so I can know how to do it in the future. Yeah, like you said, it is indeed a dog eat dog world, and I think that's why I'm like very grateful that I've chosen the group of people, the clients, etc., that I work with. And not everyone has that luxury for sure, but उसमें ये है कि यार like learning from that situation is still worth it to go through. But yeah, sometimes you can't be a leader in every situation. ऐसा तो होता है.
Asad, I have a question, और ये मेरे साथ बड़ी दफा होता है कि sometimes you disagree with your leader, right? और उस disagreement की वजह से you're not able to put in your best effort because you're not believing in that particular way of thinking, yeah, particular project that you're working on, your way of solving that problem, I would say, right? So how do you manage that relationship? How do you manage that situation from the person's end also and from the leader's end also, where your team is also not trusting you? Okay, yeah, maybe this is not the right thing we should be working on. Maybe this is not the right way, right? Or वो question कर रहे हैं, doubt कर रहे हैं, and they start talking about you behind your back also. So I've been in those situations. So how do you manage that situation? The trust is
I mean,
lacking.
I'll give you maybe Maki, like two thoughts, right? Thought number one, वो जो हदीस है ना कि लाइक अगर कोई बुरी चीज़ हो रही हो, आप पहले अपने हाथ से रोकें, फिर अपनी ज़बान से उसके बारे में बुरा कहें, या फिर अपने दिल में बुरा जाने. That is the logic I think we should aspire to use. I will say 100%. I don't live this logic every day in every situation, but that is I think like a good framework for us to think about, like what are the different degrees of freedom that we may have to try to change someone's behavior or try to change the situation. And then the second thing I'll say, Makki, is like sometimes like and then I've noticed this about myself too. There are moments where I am feeling the other person is doing something wrong. The other person is taking the team in the wrong direction. And my first instinct is to say कि नहीं ये गलत है, right? Like हाथ से रोकना और जबान से रोकना. But I have to like like for at least like a few minutes, I have to try to put myself in the other person's shoes and think about why are they suggesting this? Because it is possible that they are doing this because there is an information asymmetry. They know something that I don't know. Like maybe they know the client, maybe they know the situation, maybe they have more experience in this topic, etc. Or secondly, like also get advice, right? And so that would be my उस situation में it's very hard to dissociate yourself from the emotion that you yourself are feeling, and especially in those moments when you feel very, very strongly. I'll give you an example, right? One of my उर्दू में बोलता हूँ, मेरा एक client है which acquired a company in a country that shall not be named, right? और वो उनकी leadership team में integrate हो गए. I went straight to the partner and I said, भाई thank you very much. ये मैं इस team में I don't want to be a part of this team because I know for both parties it's not a good answer. क्योंकि मुझे पता है मैं खुश नहीं होऊंगा और मुझे पता है वो भी डेफिनेटली खुश नहीं होंगे. तो thank you very much, Allah Hafiz, right? And so I think there are these situations where sometimes your first instinct is probably the right one, but then in other situations it's helpful to talk to someone about it and think about it more holistically.
Sure.
Sorry, long answer.
Laiba and then Numan. And then Nasik.
Okay, Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I just want to say Jazakallah khair for this session because this was much needed in the professional space, both corporate and entrepreneurial, and we don't see much of these initiatives happening. So this was super, super insightful. One question I have, which I think is similar to the themes that Shahrukh and everyone else was talking about, is that, for example, I've had a work experience where a supervisor or project manager was doing everything right on in the books. They were not passing down the pressure. They were consulting their team members. They were involving them. They were forgiving. They were kind and nice, and they would check in with their team, what's wrong, and try to accommodate them as much as possible. But that did not work out well for them. In fact, it just fired back because people started taking that particular project manager as okay, he's too chill and he's too lenient, and inke saath to you can take that for granted, and uh, the team started skipping work a lot more than they would have if the project manager was someone strict. And that just confused me because in his capacity, he's doing, obviously, he's not perfect, he does have his flaws, but he's doing everything right in the books, and it's just not working out for the entire team. So, what does one do in that situation? Do they revert back or they adjust accordingly? Actually, there's no point in being nice, so I should just not do that anymore. Or how to kind of recoup the situation after that.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's a great question, Laiba. I guess if I go back to the first piece that I was sharing around, like what does leadership look like, right? It's the ability to influence, inspire, and guide others. And but nowhere did I say, and I think even Maki Bhai did not say that you have to be an amazingly nice person to do it. Now, of course, being nice helps, right? You get more flies with honey versus whatever vinegar, I think, whatever the saying is, right? But usme the purpose of leadership is to achieve an outcome, and if you're not being effective in that outcome, it's incumbent upon you as a leader to change the tactic. Like back to exactly what Shahrukh was saying, right? Okay, if somebody is taking advantage of you, somebody's not reacting in the right way, etc., etc., you have to change what you're doing as a leader. And I think we often conflate the being good and inspire, like inspiration can take many different forms. It can come through personal empathy, but it can also come through like real rigor and excellence. There is a partner, for another colleague that I work with. We have a very different view of how the world works and what does effective leadership look like. But there are elements about his ability that I really admire because he can get amazing things done. Uska jo bar hai problem solving ka, it is much higher than mine, and the teams that he leads get to like fantastically great answers. And so I find that attribute about him quite inspiring, and I'm trying to learn from that while still not being true to my style. So like I would say, like, there's no, I'll say, one size fits all answer, but I think, like, again, like if you as a leader are not able to influence and inspire the team, then I think you have to switch from being quote unquote nice to, like, something that is more effective.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would just also add, a good leader would also understand the, like, हम अगर consulting terms में कहते हैं कि understand the needs of the client, right? और अगर मैं नबी की जिंदगी को देखूं तो understand the need of the religion or what Allah wants, right? So अगर वो that person or that manager is ignoring कि मेरा actually काम क्या था और वो सिर्फ टीम को खुश करने में लगा हुआ है, I think that's problematic, and that's just being unfair to your job also. I think if you look at two jobs के you have to fulfill the client need और दूसरी तरफ है you have to keep the team happy, तो I think सबसे ये चीज ज़्यादा is dominant, right? Sometimes you cannot keep the team happy. You have to make them work long hours अगर client नहीं खुश, ठीक है, अगर client की requirement नहीं पूरी होगी, right? But then how you manage that situation, this is where your leadership comes in, I think. Yeah. Okay, very quickly, Numan, Nasik, and then Amar, I think, in that particular way. Ji.
Thank you, Ahmed and Asad. I don't want to hog the mic for too long, so I'll just share two quick learnings and then I think followed by one question. I think regarding the question Shahrukh and Laiba asked, I faced similar situation. I think one of the things that is helpful is, yes, tell the team that you're being nice in the way, I don't want to be that hands-on. I like being hands-off, but we're working towards and we have to deliver. So it would be uncomfortable if I have to be more hands-on, just to straight up set some expectation as well. You're given this trust, so please don't exploit it. That's one. Secondly, I think all of these situations are mostly relevant when you're managing people. I think there's another aspect of leadership that I wanted to share, especially in consulting where people are very competitive. There's some people have the tendency to sort of step over other people and think if the other person looks bad and you do good work, so the gap you create can help your promotion. But I think I'll just quote like Amar, Muhammad Ali as well. You only go up or by lifting others. So it's in some other wording, right? So I think it's also trying to not see your colleagues as your competition, but as one team. So these are the two learnings. The question I have is, Asad bhai, the one thing that you mentioned, I think especially in consulting, you're working around the globe in the region here as well, the GCC, etc., Middle East. There are some uncomfortable situations. There's some news at times that you don't really feel that your religious values align with what your employer or firm may be doing or might be happening. And given you're not always a partner or a senior partner or even an AP, right? To say have a lot of influence on that. So I know the three levels थी कि आप हाथ से रोको और दिल से तो खैर बुरा मानते ही हैं, लेकिन जबान से भी कहना can have some, let's say, implication or consequences for you. So how do you manage that the realism कि यार मुझे क्या कहना चाहिए, क्या करना चाहिए versus just staying silent? So thank you.
It's a fantastic question, Omar. I'll try to give a quick answer just in the interest of time, and then please ping me and happy to talk about this and give more specific advice to your specific situation. Look, I will say is in this kind of situation, there are two things you can do. Thing number one is I would always encourage people to look for productive ways to contribute, right? So there is the potentially unproductive way, which is to do something unhelpful, right? Like create a ruckus or create like a challenging environment in which people will not engage properly, right? Versus you do something productive, which is you try to raise funds for charity, for charity towards the causes that you care about, right? Where you try to empathize with people who are going through that, where you try to raise awareness, etc. These things I found, जिन चीजों पे कोई बंदा ऑब्जेक्ट भी नहीं कर सकता कि आप कोई गलत काम कर रहे हैं, right? तो उस तरह से I think we also have to be like thoughtful and strategic in these matters, and so that would be one bit of advice. And then the second bit of advice is, I think Alhamdulillah I've reached a point in my career कि जो consequence होगा वो होगा, right? And I've accepted it. And Alhamdulillah, like I said, मैं 10-12 साल के बाद अगर किसी ने कुछ करना है, मेरे बारे में कुछ कहना है, they're more than welcome to, and I'll live with the consequences of that. Not everyone has that privilege. And इसलिए मैं I'm vocal, you see me vocal, because मुझे पता है कि मैं ये कर सकता हूँ, लेकिन and so I try to create an environment in which other people don't have to do this, and then मैं उनकी help कर रहा हूँ, right? And so the thing I would ask you, Noman, and everyone else to reflect is like, what are you capable of doing, and what is within your circle of control, and what is the right way for you to engage? It's a very personal question, and हर बंदे की situation बहुत फर्क है. लेकिन like I said, I mean, in these situations too, like मैं भी दूसरे लोगों से मशवरा लेता हूँ, और मैं भी the reason I'm able to do this is because of the support and the help and the encouragement of others. उनके बगैर मैं भी जो छोटी मोटी चीजें मैं कर रहा हूँ वो भी नहीं कर रहा होता, right? So we all have to lean on each other. Sorry, Noman, it's a bit of a broad answer, but like I said, please ping me and happy to discuss specific.
I think that, Asad, that's very important because sometimes we actually don't even have idea से करना क्या है. हमारे अंदर energy बहुत आ जाती है, and we actually need to get together and discuss what can we do within some bounds, within the situation, circumstances में रह के, right? And the other thing जो आपने mention किया, that's very important कि अल्लाह ताला हम सबको इस point पे पहुंचाएं कि अगर मैं कुछ कह भी दूं तो मुझे कुछ फर्क ना पड़े, right? क्या मुझे प्रोफेशनली डैमेज कर देंगे. इट्स ऑल्सो द वर्क दैट स्पीक्स फॉर यू. तो कि अगर आपने अच्छा काम किया हुआ तो यू हैव मोर क्रेडिबिलिटी. बट एनीवेज, वेरी क्विकली, नासिक एंड देन अमार एंड देन राफे. गो टू ड्रॉप ऑफ. जी नासिक, वेरी
So,
क्विकली.
yeah, assalamu alaikum, and jazakallah khair to both of you once again. I'm actually going to give my question to Rafi. I think Noman, you asked a great question, and that was the same one I had in my mind. So jazakallah khair once again.
Okay, very good, very good. Amar and then Rafe.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan again. I apologize asking three different questions, but this question I had more so about consulting and Islam. So for a bit of context, alhamdulillah, I'm at EY right now as a consulting intern, and my team's great. Lots of Muslims. My partner, my senior manager, both are Muslim. They understand, Jummah, they understand prayer, etc. Now, when I look towards the future, if let's say Allah decides to place me somewhere else, I'm a bit worried about how their reaction would be towards my religious duties, whether it's Eid, like taking time off for Eid or Jummah or prayer, etc. How have you both navigated that?
Yeah. So
That's
Amar,
more
like
relevant to you, I think.
the most blunt advice I can give you is be open about it, right? Like and honestly, again, like I was very open, right? Like in the first 7-8 years of my career, I was not open about it. I would literally sneak out of the Toyota plant at lunchtime and like drive like crazy, go to the mosque to pray, and then come back praying that no one noticed me. And then by the time I left Toyota, my manager was like, "Yeah, तुम जाते थे तो why didn't you ever tell me?" And he was like, "The reason I didn't tell you that I knew is because you were clearly uncomfortable about talking to me about it. I wish you just told me." And again, this is one of those things that again, you can only realize in hindsight. Just be open with people. And by the way, if you're open with people and they react badly, I think that's a pretty clear sign. Okay, what does that workplace value about you and your faith, and does it
Right.
fit or not? Sorry, Maki bhai, you might have a different view.
No, I thought it's more relevant for you. So great answer. I think just be confident about your identity. I think Allah Ta'ala will help
Yeah.
you, inshallah.
And maybe
Right,
one
inshallah.
quick add would be pragmatic, right? So for example, we see this at Eid al-Fitr time always of the don't tell your manager on the day of Eid which day is Eid, right? You can just tell them like, look, I don't know which day. It's going to be either Tuesday or Wednesday, but like one way or another, I will message you Monday night. Rather than tell and just not show up on Tuesday because it was Eid. Like choti moti cheeses, like small things to just like help it be palatable also for others, and show that you're going out of your way to be as flexible as possible while still delivering on the things that are important to you.
Right,
Okay, very
right.
good. Very good.
Jazakallah khairan.
Rafi, thank you, Amar.
Thank
Rafi last, and then inshallah we'll end. I don't want to take more
Thank
time.
you. Thank you, Maki bhai, Asad bhai. I just want to like share a bit of my experience. यहाँ पे like अभी आपसे कई लोगों ने सवाल किया कि like अगर आप चिल मैनेजर हैं और आप बहुत कंसर्न शो कर रहे हैं तो people can start also pushing you over. I think what worked in my experience, and I just want to share my experience here with everyone, वो ये था कि I would set the expectations very clearly in the very beginning. आई वर्क इन द सिविल सर्विस. वहाँ पे सरकारी नौकरी से आप किसी को निकाल तो सकते नहीं है, तो आपके पास जो पेनल्टी वाला जो एस्पेक्ट है वो नहीं है जिस तरह से आपके पास वो एक टूल होता है इन द प्राइवेट सेक्टर. सो मेरी एक्सपेक्टेशंस मैं अपने स्टाफ से बहुत अर्ली ऑन डिस्कस कर लेता था कि यार मेरा तुम्हारा ताल्लुक जो है ना वो काम का है, ठीक है. एंड देन अगर तुम्हारा मेरा काम अच्छा जा रहा है देन एवरीथिंग एल्स अराउंड इट रिवॉल्व्स अराउंड इट. सो फॉर एग्जांपल, आई डू अंडरस्टैंड कि हफ्ते में 5 दिन है, 9 से 5 सरकारी नौकरी है, 9 से 5 ही बैंक खुले होंगे, उसी टाइम ही किसी बच्चे की पेरेंट टीचर मीटिंग भी हो सकती है. तो वो जो आपने एक ह्यूमेन एलिमेंट अपना बताया इंटीमेसी वाला, आई थिंक वो दैट रियली हेल्प मी इन माय एक्सपीरियंस कि जब मैं अपने स्टाफ के साथ जो बहुत शायद FA BA पास लड़के होते थे उनके साथ बैठ के उनको पूछता था कि अच्छा तुम्हारी फैमिली में क्या चल रहा है, अच्छा ये है, किसी के बच्चे को हॉस्पिटल लेके जाना है, तो आई वुड बी वेरी कॉग्निजेंट कि अच्छा ये है तो दिस इज इंपॉर्टेंट. काम अच्छा चल रहा है ठीक है, लेकिन फैमिली ऊपर आती है. तो आई थिंक ये जो एक अप्रोच थी मेरी टुवर्ड्स माय फेलो गवर्नमेंट ऑफिशियल्स, दैट रियली हेल्प मी, और वो मेरे ताल्लुकात आज तक उनके साथ कायम हैं। वो मेरा उस तरह से रिगार्ड करते हैं जैसे वो किसी और ऑफिसर का नहीं करते। लाइक मैं भी अमेरिका में बैठ के उनको काम कहता हूँ कि यार फलानी चीज़ें मुझे चाहिए, करके दो मुझे, दे वुड डू इट। ठीक है। तो मैं सिर्फ ये शेयर करना चाहता था बाकी सबके साथ भी कि लाइक अगर आप इंटीमेट लाइक उनके साथ होते हैं, अपने स्टाफ के साथ उनको बताते हैं या उनके साथ एक अच्छा ताल्लुक कायम करते हैं, इसका मतलब हरगिज ये नहीं है कि दे कैन टेक यू फॉर ग्रांटेड व्हेन इट कम्स टू वर्क।
Yes.
एंड आई थिंक वो एक बैलेंस अगर आप मेंटेन कर लें, तो आपका स्टाफ को पता है कि आप ट्रिगर कहाँ पे होंगे, और कैसे उन्होंने आपसे लाइक अपने एक रीजनेबल एम्बिट में रहते हुए उन्होंने आपसे कोई डिमांड करनी तो वो कैसे करनी है। सो दैट्स जस्ट माय कमेंट।
Thank you, Rafi.
Zabardast. I think that was very, very useful, Rafi. All right, Jazakallah, everyone. Thank you for joining. We went over time by 40 minutes, but thank you for listening. Thank you, Asad, for your time. Inshallah, we'll stay connected.
Thank you, Maki Saab. All right. Take care, everyone. Assalamu alaikum.